Yeah, I think that's it. And then Sue and I have been working together actually for years now, 6 years or something like this, and are like increasingly enjoying like developing workshops together within design, and usually with this frame of closed loop systems tied to everything we do in some way.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jennifer. And I'm Sue Fairburn, and I'm coming to you from the west coast of Canada. And it could be that my setting is actually also part of the inspiration behind some of the workshops we do. I moved to a small island a few years ago, and I've become even more aware of how an island community forces and invites us both to really think about what circular systems mean, and also what self-sufficiency means and how those two relate. And it also has brought in this whole topic of care and how might we care for each other, how might we care for our community. And that's one that we've been exploring more and more together, Jennifer and I. So I am a lecturer in design and a design researcher who has done this both in Scotland, which is where Jennifer and I first met, and more recently now on the west coast of Canada, as mentioned. So I think without further hesitation, we'll probably start with a little bit of a warm-up, a setting the frame. I just want to maybe welcome Kavita and Ewan and Sanya, along with all of our fantastic hosts from Uroboros Festival. And we're hoping that because we have a nice intimate group, that we might all just take part in this together. So Jennifer, I'll pass it over to you, and we can get started with the frame.
Yeah, I'm trying to share my screen and obviously having issues.
That's okay.
No. So, sorry. Okay, well, everyone will get an insight into my desktop.
And while we're just kind of getting started, if you want to take a look at the Miro board, you'll get a sense of the space we'll be working in. All right.
Also, if you have a pen and paper beside, you need that. And if you don't, it would be great if you could get it.
Fantastic.
Okay. How might the concept of remoteness provided by islands enable us to engage in exploring, defining, and imagining care? By 2050, as you may all know, the UN forecasts that more than 2/3 of us will live in urban settings. Many of the world's biggest and most attractive settings are also the most dangerous places to live when it comes to our mental health, as the risk factors rise with social isolation, discrimination, and poverty contributing to the socio-ecology of cities. Islands are often considered metaphors for isolation, as they offer refuge from society or intentional separation from those elements that challenge us in our survival. Joan Tronto and Bernice Fisher define care as everything that we do to maintain, continue, and repair our world so that we can live in it as well as possible. That world includes our bodies, ourselves, and our environment, all of which we seek to interweave in a complex, life-sustaining web. At the heart of our conversations today, we will be asking what options can we raise to care for ourselves and others, and can our locale offer the means we seek?
So we'd like to just invite you all now to close your eyes. I won't be doing that because otherwise I won't be able to read, but please close your eyes and just take this moment to kind of go in. Fragrant island, a product of Alfred Jarry's 20th century imagination, retreats upon intrusion, protecting its biodiversity from unwelcome guests like a finger prodding an anemone. Its remote shore retracts and folds upon itself in worry. An intuitive location with the knowledge to be wary of those that did not understand its landscape. The land provided its own system of care. With a defensive shore of madrepores, Jerry created a self-safeguarding island which resonates with historically untouched locations on our planet. Fragrant Island could be read as a foreshadowing of ideal interactions with our planet, where we would be told to turn around. The picture of a sensitive island is now an unfamiliar idea, beyond reversal, and something of a fantasy. You can now open your eyes, and if you want to, you may now start to draw your own island of care in relation to the theory and some of the methodologies that you might have read about this workshop and that we'll be speaking to a bit more next.
We wanted, I mean, there seems to be a lot of questions in this workshop, but the purpose of workshops. We were also asking, how can the design of care help us to understand the individual and the community so that we're not always just alone, that we live. And we can see from the last year as well how certain like care networks have really, well, if anyone saw the news about what happened in Glasgow last week, I think it's like really obvious the strength that these kind of community groups can have in saving people in your neighbours. So, and if you haven't seen that, then I'll like definitely share any links about it. So, following the picture of Jarry's Fragrant Island, this conversation will explore, define, and imagine care and remoteness through a number of island scenarios from our present day that allow us to understand differing occurrences of socio-ecological survival, preparation, and safeguarding. These factors will be considered through fictional islands. Instead of following the common trope of utopias, as they can be kind of tiring, actually, frequented in speculative design, these fictional lands will give conversations of design towards care, mobility, and locality. Valentine and Candy both note that the future visions in and for society are caught in a competing binary between the unthinkably bad and the unimaginably good, i.e. between dystopia and utopia. Like Matt Ward, we want to redirect the speculative trajectory along a route of care. Interventions of care are functional, sited, tangible, and ongoing. So where speculative design tends towards provocations, dialogues of care enable design to be accessible and mobile through a humanitarian lens, where locals take on effective agency. Following Haraway, as I think nearly everyone in this conference has, this non-arrogant collaboration will help us to reveal how the world works and to explore dilemmas in and possibilities of care. Access to what the public has come to expect informs the basis for care, be it the community, the practice, or the context of care itself. We want to conclude the session with a comparison of different approaches to remote island living, with considerations of care from the varied terrains we collectively explore. Oh, you're muted.
Thanks, Jennifer. I have a very squeaky chair, so if I move, you'll know it. Okay. I'm just going to give you a bit more information about the workshop and what we'll be doing together in this conversation. So it'll generally be a facilitated activity-based conversation. A cartographic conversation is also how we refer to it. And during the session, the design of care will be explored, we'll be defining it, and we'll be imagining it via a series of fictional island settings. These have been drawn from the book Dictionary of Imaginary Places by Manuel and Guadalupe in 1980. This book here, it's fantastic. And by using fictional locations, we will have the opportunity to probe care through differing sites with diverse equalities. So we're going to invite you to imagine yourself as an insect architect, as an ethnographer, as a writer, as a lichen cartographer, as the ocean, as the climate. These are all the possible things, all the possible ways that you can be anything but human this morning. De Battista writes of imagination's anticipatory capacity by suggesting it is a condition, a frame of mind that prepares someone to do something, understanding it to be based on the knowledge and not on nothing. The use of fictional places is one way of furthering imagination due to the familiarity and unfamiliarity that you're invited to think onto the terrain. And by probing your collective thoughts and encouraging material articulation of the conversation, we recognize the importance of imagination and apply it as a thought experiment. For the purposes of this work, imagination will facilitate critically rethinking the structures and modes of care of design. The exploration of the scenarios together this morning will help us to reveal how the world works and to explore dilemmas in and those possibilities of care. And while that world includes our bodies and ourselves and our environments, it is a social and material cast of things, creatures, people, and places that will be enacted and thought through us through this anything but human lens.
Last year, we also referenced Jessie Byers' work, but I think this paper that we're referencing that we can put in the chat is so good. So she writes, if we can learn anything from our current situation, is that we cannot hope the revolution into existence. I think that, like, I was reading this again this morning and I was thinking, yeah, yeah, we really have to be active. So while everybody is sure that change is right around the corner, that our human power and ingenuity will steer us the right way, while everybody is waiting and seeing, assured that time is on our side, while we refresh our news feeds again and again and again, hope is exposed for what it really is, not a motor for change, but a brake. Beyond hoping for someday when the skies will finally part, when realism is exposed as yet another ambit of human philosophical privilege, when we realize that perhaps the earth is not ours to save, we must produce modes of thinking and acting that are capable of short-circuiting the here and now in order to play out the scene differently. We aim to play out the scene differently during this visualized cartographic conversation. And yeah, we're encouraging everyone, including ourselves, to kind of reflect on understanding care through this more like critical, collaborative mapping and discussion. And hopefully we can think about ways for it not to just like act as hope, but what else it could be and how we could apply that in our own lives, or yeah, as it is.
So the mapping exercise that we're going to ask us to all get involved in this morning is really going to invite us to answer some questions and answer these questions by discussion, but also by doing. So how might a thought experiment involving islands, both real and imaginary, help us to better understand what it means to care for oneself and for one's community? The session right now has provided a brief introduction to the topic and the use of scenarios and thought experiments. So we've invited you to draw the first island that comes to mind. If you haven't already started that, if you can grab a sheet of paper, or if you want to use your tablet, either of those is fine. And think about that first island that comes to mind and reflect on the theory and the methodology that we've spoken about. Hopefully you've now done this, and this will start to open up our discussion before we collectively focus on one example of care through a chosen island test site of care. So we'll discuss that together, and we'll choose that island test site, and that'll help us set the scene and the parameters for defining the conditions of care for and by design. So I've noticed that I'm not sure if everyone has had a chance to access the Miro board. Hopefully you have, and we'll just sort out the issue with editing. But as soon as you look at the Miro board, you'll see that there's a number of fictional island settings, and they have various attributes and population sizes. So the visual verbal conversation that we're going to start now is going to, in fact, be captured on the Miro board in a sort of digital drawing and recording. And as we do this together, we'll identify and map the definitions and the interventions of care for our island of choice. And this activity essentially allows us to have sort of visual and verbal elements so that there's choice in format, and that choice is dependent on the role that you choose within the group. So think about that a little bit more as we come back together and meet both in this Zoom space, this virtual remote platform, and on the Miro board. And do come back to this question of what might care mean to you, to the island, to the community, and to an ecosystem as a whole. Okay, so I've just come back to the chat, and I can see that Kavita doesn't have access to the Miro. We can send her, I've just looked at the Miro board, and I can see everybody else there. I've got two of the boards up. So I'll just see if, do we maybe need Kavita's email address to do that?
I think she maybe sent you a request.
Oh, I'm in now. I'm in now. Okay,
fantastic.
All good.
Okay, good. Fantastic. Good. So we're live and ready to roll. So on the left-hand side of the Miro board, you'll see that there's the instructions that you might have been sent or accessed in advance that gives sort of an overview. And then at the bottom of that, there's some links to Cities of Spaceship, the website, Instagram posts today, and Facebook. So it just gives you a sense of some of the work that we've done and how we essentially look at the world. I'm just coming back to the Zoom.
Yeah,
so
you should have received the handout as well, I hope.
Yes.
And if you didn't, then we can also send that on to you.
So the next step is I would ask whether anyone's had a chance to draw the first island that came to mind as we were speaking to you and sharing a little bit more about the methodologies and the underlying theory. And I invite you to turn on your microphones because we're a small group. I think it's really kind of nice to have sort of this live, informal, impromptu conversation.
Yeah, it would be nice actually if everyone could just introduce themselves, and if you have drawn an island, maybe it's like through the island, but yeah, we also want to know who you are, and yeah. Maybe we could start with Kavita.
Hi, I'm still struggling with Miro for some reason. Like I don't have editor rights, so I can't draw anything. But when it comes to the first island that I think of, I actually grew up on an island. I was there for 15 years of my life. So the first 15. So that's the island that came to mind. That was home. It was a small little home. The island is called Bahrain. It's near Saudi Arabia. So, and with that island, the other thing that popped into mind is that that island has a tree in the middle of the desert, and nobody knows where the tree gets its water source. And so it's called Tree of Life. So yeah, those are the two things that sort of jumped at me. Yeah, when it comes to the idea of island. Yeah, and I think it's about, I guess, this tree managing to survive out there with, I don't know, with the it's kind of out of its depth. It sort of doesn't belong in that environment, but yet it does. So, and yet it's managing to survive out there. So yeah, that's what kind of came to mind.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the tree? What's it growing on?
So it's really out in the middle of the desert. So if you have to go there, you actually, I think it takes around like an hour from the city part of the desert. You have to drive down. I think it takes around an hour. So the south part of the island is actually not developed at all. So it's all sand dunes and everything. Pretty desolate, I guess, in some ways, in the sense that there's no foliage out there. But that's the only tree that's been standing there by itself. I don't quite know how old it is. I guess it's considered to be really old. And something else came to mind. There are a lot of like myths around it, but I can't seem to remember them right now. It's still all green. There are questions. So apparently that tree actually it grows in the Indian subcontinent, but for some reason it's out there. So yeah, if I remember anything else, I'll share.
Fantastic. It sounds like a brilliant start. And I just have this immediate vision of this tree with nothing around it. But there must be life, because it is life. Yeah, it must be talking and communicating and cared for in different ways.
Yeah. And the interesting part about the south of the island, it's actually a military base at the south. So Bahrain is a military base for the US. And so the bottom part of the island is actually where there's a military base. And then there's this tree over there, just standing there. Yeah. Can do it.
Fantastic. Marketa?
Yeah, I can go on. I was thinking that I have quite like ambivalent relationship to islands. So I was born in Prague, Czech Republic. And, you know, Czech people are kind of known for having this obsession with sea because we don't have any. So it's always this miracle, you know, traveling to see the sea was always like the biggest adventure or biggest treat, especially if you were a kid and you had the chance to travel to Yugoslavia, you know, or some place like that, that just you can see the amount of water. So yeah, it's on one hand, islands are something quite like spectacular to me. But then I moved to Singapore and I lived 5 years in Singapore. And that's a very specific island as well. So in a way, yeah, it was very, like I remember that when I moved there, the first weeks and months, I was just walking around and I was just constantly being fascinated. I always made sure to every day go to the shore and just stared into the water, and many people around me just saw that it's weird. Like, why would you always go every day? Like, what is so fascinating about it? But it worked for me. So yeah, I'm even wondering what would I draw, you know, as an island. Like, my question that appeared in my mind when you were talking was like, what is actually island? Is it something that is just physical, or is it something that is in our minds, in our, you know, object of our imaginations? Does it need to have physical shape? So no clear drawings yet.
That's okay. I can see it in the mind. It's happening in its own way as well. Kavita now has access, so that's great. I'm just coming back to Sanya.
Yes, hello everyone. Well, I didn't grow up on an island, but it definitely felt like I did. I grew up in a very, very remote area. Instead of being isolated, I think for me, island, first and foremost, somewhat associated. Well, I actually have two associations. I'm a geographer. In geography, we have these two ways of how we relate to distance. One is relative distance and one is absolute distance. And I think sometimes also what Marketa brought up about, is it something physical or is it mental? And I think when it talks about physical, when I think about physical distance, then I imagine islands somewhere being separated in the middle of the sea, or in my case, I grew up in a very peripheral area. I wasn't surrounded by the sea, but it was surrounded by the forest and forest and forest. And then we talk about relative distance, and that's more of a cognitive distance as well, as to how cognitively you are connected to the rest of the world. And for me, I felt like I was living on a different planet. So for me, islands, I was also thinking, how do I draw an island? And first thing that came to my mind was something like something black hole almost. It's like something, a void almost. But I think it's because for me, I also had an experience of living on an island of Madeira for a year and something. And the amazing thing was that when I was growing up in peripheral area, and I felt really isolated from the rest of the world. And it was also before the internet, so I wasn't really able to connect to outside the world the way people that live in remote areas have the ability to do now. And then I lived on an actual island that was physically kind of very distant and isolated from the rest of the world, and it felt the same. It really felt the same. So I guess what you, Marketa, said, is it mental or is it physical? I think it's a bit of both, and the amazing thing that they both can feel the same way. At least in my case, they did.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Yeah, and I can again, I imagine you in this forest, and there's always an edge to a forest, because trees will eventually stop. And then I think of of Kavita talking about the tree as being the only tree, and everything, and so the tree was almost the edge for everything else, or was it the opposite? So yeah, I think it's really nice that this kind of this way of reversing the way we see things. And thank you very much for sharing the perspective of a geographer about the relative distance and the absolute distance. That's a really nice frame for us to think about. Ewan, would you like to share your thoughts on an island? And I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right. Ewan, are you there? Feel free to write in the chat as well if you prefer. You're showing as mute. There we go. Well, we're maybe just waiting to see if we can connect with Ewan. Michael, would you like to join and maybe share a little bit more? I don't know if you had a chance to hear the whole sort of opener that we shared, but we'd love to hear from you.
Hi there. Sorry to be up for a little. Hi. Just trying to tune in. I understand the question was like my relation to the island, but I jumped in just 5 minutes ago, so I'm not sure if should answer now or maybe like I will join later to get more into topic, because I'm a latecomer. Sorry for that.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Michael. Enrique?
Yes. So I posted my island in the chat, in the mirror board. It's an image. I'm not sure I can hear you now. Okay. Ah, yes. So yeah, I made, yeah, I have it here.
I see your island.
And it's because when I was thinking about island, of course, I had to think about the island I grew up, which is Lanzarote. And it's a small volcanic island, part of the Canary Islands of the west coast of Morocco. And when I think about the island in terms of care, I instantly think about emotions and feelings. And what I have always felt with that island is that, very much like what Marketa and then Sania were talking about, perhaps more in the way that Sanya talks about it as a void, but for me, it's not so much of a void. For me, or perhaps it is some sort of void because it attracts, it has like this force that kind of attracts emotions. And when I am in the island, I can feel that pressure even stronger, almost like yeah, feelings get magnified, emotions run very on your skin. I guess it has these cultural, physical angles to it, or kind of perspectives on top of each other, but it's something really surprising because um, most of my friends, we left the island because there is no university there and not much work. So most of us left the island, and many of my friends had to come back because they always felt there was something missing. So in a sense, the void was not the island. I don't know if I'm making any sense. Anyways, yes, that's why I made this kind of folded island, because it has so many crevices and holes and hidden spaces. Yeah.
You can almost imagine with your island sort of the Earth being the one to have folded it and all the planetary forces having created it in this scale,
Yeah.
which is just fantastic. We have no sense of scale with your island, which is brilliant. It's just this formation. So nice. Thank you very much, Enrique. Anna, are you? Don't know if Anna's there. So I see that Jennifer, do you want to jump in as well?
Into the to talk about it. Yeah, I suppose I've thought about a couple of things in terms of growing up in Scotland. There's like both this idea of like Britain itself being an island, and then of course the islands that surround Scotland as well as being like super remote. But I think the thing about Britain more largely is there's always some, like, even though it was or is like still part of like the continent of Europe, there was always a disconnect because it never had this like literal land connection. And I think that there was always like, yeah, some sort of like despair or sadness that there couldn't, that there was like water, what for other countries has, I mean, maybe not always been a good relationship, but allows this like total freedom of movement. But there's always been, like, you have to fly somewhere to get there. And then the other island, my dad and like that side of my family all live on Vancouver Island, which is also like kind of large. I suppose if I think about islands just like without thinking about where I come from, I always imagine them to be a lot smaller, but like that isn't the case. Like as like an island, and it's this like massive land that's so big, but for some reason my imagination is always taken to these like very small, like pursuit. I think that would be my initial consideration of what an island is and what I think about when I think about, yeah, the relationships between people and community and what it means from the mainland or the island. There was a storybook I always read as a child called Katie Morag, and had grandparents on an island off of Scotland called Uist, and grandparents who lived on the mainland, and one was called Granny Island and the other was called Granny Mainland. And I think that's like a distinction of who the person is dependent on like what piece of land they come from, and like the island represents that is.
Fantastic. So it's lovely because I hear sort of all these different perspectives and kind of our starting point, which I think is part of this conversation, because we bring with this our own perspective, our own experience, our own histories, the way people talk about islands, the way people talk about remote, and the way the community responds in those situations. And I think in this conversation, what we'd now like to do is collectively identify, I guess, a starting point for a fictional island. And using the Miro board, once we've chosen which of the cards we want to work with, it will give us the constraints, or it'll give us, I guess, that starting point, the attributes. So we've all sort of thrown some islands on, and it's fantastic to see. And I see sort of constructed islands, and I see almost mapped islands. Mine ended up being a side view of an island, and I love the island of the mind as well. If we go to the top of the Miro board, we can see these cards with 3 and 22 and 23 and 12. And these were a set of fictional islands that we worked together to develop. We'll talk to you a little bit more about them. And then what we'd like to do is find out which of these you might feel is most interesting for us to use as a starting point. Each one of them on the left-hand side gives you a sense of almost the shape of the island. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the attributes. So the population, the services, let's say the geography, maybe sort of a predominant feature of the island. And then a little bit of a description. So we can see on the blue cards, number 3, almost what looks like Fragrant Island with its fingers reaching out. And this island we've described as idiosyncratic, it's collective, it's about maintenance, there's variability to its shores and its form. We might think about the services that might sit on this island or that this island might give rise to. We think about the geography with mountains and sheltered. We think about what that means for technology, or what that might mean for technology. And then if we imagine that this is an island of about 3,680 people, it's almost an island the same size of the population as the one I live on. And there are ever so many different creatures and ways of looking at this island. So to the right of that, you see 3 other sets. There's 22, 23, and 12. And each one of these has its own attributes. So maybe take a look and see which of these you find fascinating and you feel would be a good starting point. Some of them are more inhabited. Some of them are less inhabited with humans. But they each have sort of these descriptors that we give you as a starting point. I'll just give you a little bit of time to take a look. And then feel free to either just speak up or to put into the chat which one you might like to start with as a starting point.
The numbers were meant to reflect a clock. So if you can imagine on a clock where that would be, but it doesn't make so much sense when the world is round, or spherical. But it maybe takes you to a location somehow.
We've had another person join. I'm not sure. They are without name.
They seem to be a number, but if we are talking about numbers and time, maybe it is a symbol.
Yeah. So, Kavita, Sanya, Marquetta, Enrique, Anna, any thoughts on which island you would like to shape? Maybe maybe you'd like to start with. Maybe it's about the population, and or maybe it's about the geography. Maybe it's a set of islands.
I'm thinking about the like descriptive words for each of the island cards. And I'm thinking like I would like to synthesize them somehow. There is, for instance, the red one, the 23. It's interesting that it starts with healthy. I was wondering like how healthy if it is controlled. You know, healthy is it a human quality, the healthiness, or is it the island quality, or is it what does healthy mean? And exposed to whom?
Yeah, I think those are things that we could like also discuss if it's a moment of choice.
Yeah. So do we want to go with 23?
I don't know what others feel.
Yeah, I'm drawn to 23 as well.
Okay.
It's something about the number 5500.
Nice.
So what we can do is just take one of these and make it much larger and use that as the one that we're going to kind of didn't need to do that. And then really one of the things that we then invite you to do is to think about what your role is. If there's someone that wants to be the lichen cartographer or just a cartographer, perhaps you want to explore how to map the island from the ground, the lichen, the crawling up and over surfaces, rocks and such. Or perhaps you want to be an ethnographer. Perhaps you'd like to be an insect architect, or the climate. So maybe take a moment now just to think about what role fascinates you. I can't seem to make this one any bigger, so maybe we'll just...
I can try and take in like the card. And
okay. All right. Even just if we pull it off over to the right, I'll pull the cards as well. So we'll take this all over. Then we can...
They're now huge. Sorry,
no, that's perfect. No, that's great. We'll just work on the white space to the side of it then.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So
I think it's important that we do have a cartographer. So if someone would enjoy doing that, then that would be great.
Kavita's already started with a very clear.
Can we be anything we want?
Yes, this is your moment.
So can I be the autumn?
Yeah, you could be autumn if you want to be
yes.
And are we doing the island together?
Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna do it all together.
And start from the 23.
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
23 is our inspiration. And then, yeah, everyone has the role of something that isn't human, you know, anything that you would like to be. And
so sometimes it helps if we start from kind of the outline of the island or some sort of a form, whether that's looking from a bird's eye perspective, whether that's looking from a shore. We can try a few different views. Think about what role you've adopted and how you might draw the island. And maybe we have a couple people drawing the island, or a couple, not people, a couple, anything but humans drawing the island. So I thought we would just kind of do it somewhere in the space to the right. And the card on the left sort of starts to give you a sense. So this is an island that has some interesting sort of land formations. So I'm just going to start us off. It seems to have lines and layers. So feel free to add or subtract or put other.
What role would everyone like to be?
Should it be? Sorry, go on.
I thought perhaps I could be the energy. Yeah, like the wind, or if I want
This is
one, or it can just be the all powerful energy, natural energy. I mean, I really don't want to limit myself now that I can be anything I want.
yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, you can bring people joy.
Can I be the Mother Nature itself?
I love it.
Yeah, you can be Mother Nature.
Absolutely. So we have Mother Nature, we have autumn, we have energy.
Can I be mycelium?
Mycelium, absolutely.
Would you like the mycelium on that island?
Yes, who wouldn't love mycelium? The creators of so much, absolutely. Magic material. Fantastic. So as each of those roles, and we'll add a couple more, think about what care, what your contribution is to care on this island as Mother Nature. What would you design on the island or design into the island? Think about, that state of autumn. And is autumn a state, or is autumn a way of being? What does autumn mean, or how would autumn design care?
How would autumn also speak to Mother Nature? How are they entwined?
Yeah, those conversations. Yeah. And
yeah,
energy.
I wonder, with Mother Nature, really how you're kind of in everyone.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking about the same. I'm thinking about my role, because it's interesting to see the kind of it's letting it take its natural course. But I thought that I'm gonna add some colors.
Please do.
Just to kind of distinguish where the land meets the water, and let's see.
And then I think about energy. What is exposed energy? So many ways I would imagine energy to be exposed.
Yeah.
And who controls it, or what controls that energy? Jennifer, have you any thoughts about what you would like to be? What role?
I think I would quite like to be the ocean. I really like the idea of being, well, I don't know if it would just be the ocean in the end, because I would probably become a cloud, which is my true form. If I were to choose one. I'm have to be myself. But yeah, I think I would be some sort of cycle of water. So, and then you get to experience everything. Good and bad. Okay.
Oh, fantastic.
Marquetta, what were you thinking when you were saying earlier you wondered how something could be both complete and controlled?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Earlier you said you imagined something maybe be both healthy and controlled at the same time.
Yeah, I thought that's an interesting. So, like, we have this track at the festival called Feral, which is imagining how would things be if they are not fully under human control in ecosystems. So I was thinking, like, like it might sound like a little bit almost like from this feral perspective as like counterpoint, that you have something under control and it's also healthy, but then under whose control? Me as a mycelium, I would say, if I can, be one of those who support this distributed control, I would be happy. But yeah, I was also thinking actually when you mentioned when I saw the control, like it's such a timely word these days, no? Like many of us are worried that we are losing some sense of control over our lives because the way how we move in the world has changed throughout the last year. So there's also that.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think it takes, like, to be able to live in an island, it takes one to have a certain set of skills. You're either born into an island and then you have these skills, you know how to live on a isolated piece of space, or you arrive to an island. And I think that one of the reasons why I really like this idea of islands and well-being, and also connecting to growing urbanization trends, because with so many new people coming to live to cities, and they will have to adopt, and they'll have to settle down and get accustomed with new rules, and coming to a new place to live is always adventure, is always a new chapter. And I think the metaphor of island is really great here, because yeah, I think when it's either you are born into an island or you are born in a space that is so attractive, like big city centers, or you have to learn or acquire certain skills or to be able to live and thrive in the environment.
Yeah, there is this like island mindset, or I grew up in this like really rural town in the northeast of Scotland, and like there was even this like distinction between rural and urban, of course, but like you would refer to people who were from the city as like Townsers or something, which is so funny, as if that, yeah, their defining quality was that they had this like urban mindset, and it was completely different in the countryside. And I think, Marquetta, also coming to your point about trust and control or surveillance, I've had this obsession recently with vending machines. Like there were so many vending machines in Vienna because it was often, and then you're like, okay, where could I get that? And there was one of like a pharmacy, and like they stock things that I've never seen in vending machines in my life. And then in the town I grew up in, one of the farming one of the farms used to have this like honesty box system where you could like buy eggs and potatoes and like home bakes and this kind of thing, and you would just put in money and they would trust that you would do that. But then there started to be some theft, and they got a grant so that they could build this like massive vending machine just like in the middle of nowhere, this room with like a giant vending machine to buy like a bag of potatoes or something. And I think, yeah, I wonder if that, well, it is some version of control, which there used to be the ability to trust people in the area, but I suppose with how you now travel or how far people are willing to go in cars to get things and stuff, yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying that urban people are like stealing potatoes from the farm. I'm not really sure what was happening, but I think in terms of like technology and sorry, this has been so long. I don't know if it makes sense.
But there's something kind of interesting about it, because the human perspective is judgment. And sometimes we're very quick to judge. And an island, from a human perspective, is we very quickly kind of, I guess, familiarize ourselves with each other. And once we get a sense of each other, we accept who we are. But when there's new people or new creatures or new otherwise that come to an island, that moment of unfamiliarity is filled with judgment. And it's one of the love-hate relationships that I have with the island that I live on, that when someone new comes, there's this outpouring of acceptance and welcome. But as soon as anything questionable is done, there's judgment from every corner on the island. And so you're very quickly under the gaze and scrutiny of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really difficult if you want to be anonymous, if you want to, have, I don't know, a little degree of isolation or a little degree of invisibility. It's very difficult to do on an island. So how might you have a cloak, or how might, how might we provide ways for people to, become invisible again on an island and have that moment of, that urban experience of being able to create and recreate yourself each time you go out. So I've just drawn all these spiders for some reason all over the island,
I really like
from the side view, which, to be honest, I for me, they're looking more technological. So I'm not sure if there's an element of control or regenerative energy or what they are, but they're definitely making their way and they're migrating to the island. And I think they might be working toward this energy source that's clearly either ready to blow or something. But I love the fact that we're working in two different views. Enrique, you must love that, given that you're a professor of interaction design and trying to encourage others to look at different ways to see the world.
I think it's amazing. I really think it's amazing. I'm just trying to put myself in the from the perspective of the autumn.
Autumn.
Like, how does it move? How does it arrive?
I keep trying to draw on the Miro board in the Zoom.
Yeah.
I like that question. How does autumn arrive? And how does autumn show it cares for the community?
So, yeah, that's what I was trying to come to terms with. Does it rise from below or fall from above?
But isn't it also like connected to all the inhabitants of the island? They either help the autumn to come or maybe delay it. If you think about how seasons are changing, and we influence that, no? How are the seasons? Just people like to say that, oh, the weather is crazy, but we have our role in it. So maybe you, as autumn, are somehow connected to all the others. What they are doing on the island.
I like that. Almost this overarching not control of time, but you announce the arrival of something or the departure of something. This is a most colorful island. I'm going to move these cards over a little bit just to give us a little bit more space between.
Are you a spider? Or are you like a colony of spiders?
Me, yeah.
Yeah.
They seem quite large in comparison to the scale of our island. So I'm a little bit concerned. They're spiders of unusual size.
Yeah, maybe that's like one of the qualities of the island, so controlled by spiders and everything else.
as nature, as the mother nature, I feel like I'm not in control anymore. I feel like I cannot control anything that's happening. I feel there's spiders, there's autumn. I feel like I have no control. I feel like there's just
You can
What would
also
you
tell us like what you want.
well,
tick?
yeah. I have to say I was trying to put some color on that initial mountain, and I drew also um like a thermometer, like an island fever, I thought. So I drew this thermometer, but then I zoomed out and I realized that there's actually so much more going on, and I was just focusing on that initial mountain.
Yeah, I was also focusing on the initial mountain for quite a while.
Yeah, so I feel like I have to think, I have to check out what's going on as a mother nature, what else is developing here. But I guess that's also very fitting to say that nature is losing control, or there's just too
But
much.
it does make you wonder, how might Mother Nature sort of focus on, like, coming back to your comment actually, Sonia, about relative distance and absolute. So how would you do that as Mother Nature? How would you look at what's happening in a particular location and do what you do in that sense, while also keeping track of the bigger picture, which is very much a motherly role. That multitasking, that big picture, small picture.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of, I mean, this is interesting. I'm just trying to see what is going on there, and what is this red big spot in the middle?
I think that's energy.
That's energy.
Is that you, energy?
I think yes, but I didn't also. But I didn't. I feel that there is.
Yeah, I think I went a little over the top with drawing a section.
No, not at all.
Yeah. I was like,
like
oh yeah, this connects to this. We need this.
I feel like I should introduce some balance. I think there's a lot of happy stuff going on, but then I think we need something negative to restore the natural balance. So there are spiders, and why initially, I mean, I'm Mother Nature. I cannot think of spiders as something negative. Sanya as a person, yes, but as Mother Nature, no. So I think maybe someone would like to take a role of something more sinister. I feel like this is very utopian.
Ooh.
There was
Autumn.
Yeah, autumn. I thought if you want to bring some
Mycelium.
Yeah, I mean, my idea of the autumn has totally changed, because before I thought the autumn came to the island, but now it feels, from where I'm looking, that the island makes the autumn come at a certain time. So I really don't know. I feel like the autumn needs to take the back seat and let the island work it out when it should happen.
So the autumn announces change. Change is coming. The autumn's the leading edge of that. Could it be?
Yeah, maybe.
Also, this phrase, like the turning of the seasons, like, is kind of nice. What does it mean to also think about like the movement of autumn or something, like how does it twist things? Or as you say, is it just like receiving the information for when it should come? But then even then, like, what is the role of like turning or change? And what does autumn represent, I suppose? I think for some people, because of school, it can be beginning, but for other people, spring has that kind of feeling because of flowers.
Coming back to Mother Nature and control, what's another way of showing or taking control? Because I look at this and it's interesting from a visual or cartographic conversation, the power of line. There's a lot going on, but it's also difficult to kind of differentiate what's happening where. And it's almost like moving line. Oh, this is nice with the lines coming up over here as well. How can you take control of the line in any way, Sonia, Mother Nature?
I was actually thinking exactly that just a moment ago. I thought this seems detached in a way. I think with Ireland, you seem like everything is in kind of one space, very concentrated. So I was thinking if it would make sense to draw like a bigger circle uniting everything that we have drawn, but then I thought no, because it's still kind of in the process.
But that comes back to that question of like, how do you define an island? Is there a boundary? Is there a limit? Is there an edge?
I think that is then how you define distance. I think when absolute distance is easier purely geographically, thinking about islands as yes, isolated somewhere in the middle of the sea, in the water, and so purely geographically physical characteristics is quite easy. But then more relative cognitive distance, I think that's a bit trickier because as Jennifer in the beginning said, islands often associate with isolation. And then, well, there's a lot of people also in cities that feel quite isolated. And the same way that they cannot really connect to the communities that they are with, that they don't really, they cannot connect to the local culture, that they don't identify or they don't relate to local norms. So you don't have to be physically isolated to feel cognitively isolated or remote. So I think that's why, yeah, the idea of islands as something remote is interesting, because then suddenly it's not just the islands that are remote, as cities can also feel very lonely, although it's very counterintuitive to think of cities as something that where one can be lonely and invisible, or what's the word, anonymous.
Yep. So how might we show connection? What might connection look like on the island?
Island. I think that's what I meant when I said that it's either you're born into it and then you are by default connected. If you're born in the island, I think you will be by default connected to a community. If you are a rival, then you have to create your own communities. I think islands, at least my particular experience, is really difficult to penetrate as an immigrant, as international, living on an island. It's very difficult to penetrate these local communities. They're very protective. They're very very closed. At least that was my experience. Yeah.
It makes me think of the tree, the tree that Kavita spoke of, and I wonder how that tree got there with no other trees around. And was it a random seed that blew in off an ocean wind, and how did it land there, and how did it draw enough nourishment and conditions to grow to the point that it has? And it makes me think about this notion of homegrown versus and self-seeding, as opposed to being blown in and landing. So that sort of immigration and immigrants to islands, as opposed to coming up from the land. And both, the tree is an immigrant, it sounds like. Yeah.
It was interesting. Yeah, it would be interesting to see if it's to think that if you are an immigrant to an island, it would be easier for you to imagine an island with one tree. Maybe if you are born into Ireland, maybe then you would imagine a forest of forest.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was wondering. We often talk about native species on an island, and on the island where I live, there's no bears. So everywhere around here, the big fear of going outside in the mountains is bears and cougars. But on this island, there are no bears or cougars unless one happens to catch a lift on a log jam or swim across from another island. But you can have this sense of absolute safety because there's no wild animals, there's no threat, there's no predator. And then all of a sudden, one lands on island and everybody freaks out. So yeah, I think coming back to perhaps the utopian vision, what might land on this island to completely change the nature of community? I see an octopus. Very large octopus. Maybe that's one way for Mother Nature to take control, to be whatever lands, or to think of what might land.
Yeah, maybe someone should assume the role of an outsider into an island. Seems like we all feel quite local within the island. I was wondering what would a kind of outsider presence look in. Maybe that's too much a humanized role.
Yeah, right now there isn't that evil human. Or the blessed human.
Yeah, I'm thinking we also don't have any evil or like nefarious intentions happening right now. So we are living in this nice, symbiotic community and everything seems okay. But like in the cartography or like drawing maps, that's an act of power, Like who has the power to draw the lines on the map and divide the world into like little patches, and who decides that the line will be here and not just 1 millimeter here on the map, which can affect life of so many people living in that 1 millimeter. So
absolutely true. I was just thinking, if I came through and did this and essentially put in aggressive lines.
Yeah,
I was trying to make it even thicker, to be honest. Oh, here we go. I'm going to take these out because I don't like them.
I'm thinking, like, what if the octopus, for instance, sits on the energy source now and sucks all the energy, and then we will not have sun, so the mushrooms will not grow.
I feel we need an evil presence, because I think if it's too good, then it will be abused. So I think there should be a balance. So I see something. I think, Enrique, I'm trying to zoom in on Zoom. I was like, why isn't this working? I think someone drew a conquistador.
Oh, I see. Nice.
An invader from the West.
Yes.
Okay.
Trying to think about how does this process relate to, like this libertarian, like a fetish in like owning land and like buying islands and living there with some privileged community, like that Peter Thiel idea of this is my island only for rich white people. Like how does their planning look? Is it similar like what we are doing here? Oh, okay, I will be the Mother Nature, so I'm defining all these things. Okay, I will be providing nutrients, so I'm doing this, and there will be no competition. Nutrients are coming only from my mushrooms. If it is somehow similar,
And what will people take from the island? Not necessarily bring, but what will they take away? I mean, this, when I see the conquistador, I think immediately of what they will find and what they will take as their own, and how the island might protect what's there, and prevent someone unwanted taking.
I have a somewhat controversial idea about invaders, the modern invaders or conquistadors, modern conquistadors of today, which are the tourists. I think a lot of islands, small islands, depend on tourism. And as such, I think also in planning process or spatial planning process, tourists are much more valued or prioritized over local population, local residents, and the way what kind of spaces that are used, what kind of resources are allocated for local population, what kind of resources are allocated to accommodate the needs and wishes of tourists. So yes, I have this controversial idea that tourists are the invaders. Well,
yeah,
to some extent, I know that those islands depend on the revenue generated through tourism, but it's they still, this international tourists, they still to this day very much, they come to spaces and they affect them, they shape and they leave something. So so it's interesting to think of Ireland not only as a product of local residents, but also spaces as being socially constructed by tourists.
I was part of a workshop last week. It was based in Iceland, and it was for the search and rescue. They have 5,000 plus volunteers who essentially respond to tourists who run into difficulties when they visit Iceland and find themselves in places they shouldn't have been. But one of the main issues with Iceland as well is there are very few trees. And so what people do on the island is very hard to hide. Including waste and human waste. And I mean, there's a human waste issue on Everest, there's a human waste issue in a lot of places. And how might an island deal with the waste of others, and how might its community think of waste in different ways? So it's, in the circular economy and all of that, we think of waste as food. But in a lot of places, we don't always leave waste in a way that is ready to be food for the island or for the community of the island. So, I would agree, Sonia. I think it's a love-hate relationship with tourism. And there's the economic side, but there's also the biological side.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's really a matter of values, because you take tree that grows on the island, who has the rightest claim to it? Is it the environmentalists that want to protect it? Is it the people that get labor from that tree in some way? Or is it the industry that chops the tree and then sells it and generates value? So it's always, there's always this tension, triangular tension between environment, equity, and economic growth.
Yeah.
So who, and then at the end of the day, it does become a matter of who has the rightest claim to a resource, if it's natural or social.
I come back to the tree in the desert. What kind of a tree is it, Miketa? Oh, sorry, Kavita. My apologies, Kavita. What kind of a tree is it that was in the middle of the desert of the island you were on? Was it like a tree that gives shade to those nearby?
Hi, Sue. Sorry, were you speaking to me? My connection's like all funny right now.
No problem. Yeah, I was just asking a bit more about your tree. The tree, not your tree,
So
but
the tree that I was mentioning, it's supposed to be, I don't remember the species. It's, I was, and because of, and then mythologies around it, that it's a tree that belongs to the Garden of Eden, and that's why it survived. It has survived for so long. So I don't quite
Sorry.
actually. We just thought it was this lone tree just standing there beyond human reason. No one could explain why it survives out there. Yeah, my connection's crap. Sorry.
That's okay.
No.
It's kind of a mystery because we catch the odd word and so we try to piece it back together.
Oh, I can just write it in text what I said.
I'm going to see if I can put some trees in here.
Enrique, is your boat carrying or is it just the one?
Sorry?
Is your boat carrying more than one person or is it just the one?
Are there?
But that boat is not the autumn. I think.
True.
I mean, yeah, maybe that also contributes to the autumn, actually. Yes, that's true. I'm gonna connect the boat to the autumn.
There's a lot happening down below. I like how the energy has now come into the center of the island. So do we feel that there's anything our island needs to thrive, that the community on the island need to thrive? We've talked about what the threats are now again. How might the island prepare itself for such threats?
No, the octopus suddenly seems like she's having it quite under control. So I'm wondering, like, we also never talked about any like hierarchy or something. And I guess we don't want that, but
Sorry, about?
like hierarchies, you know, and
Hierarchies.
responsibilities and all these things that you would not want to have it on this island. But then, yeah, what if some threat comes? Who is going to do what? And how do we build trust?
Yeah, is there some sort of a way that that the community on the island or the island itself, maybe the community's found certain parts of the island lend themselves to being more protected? I look at we have a mountain, and a mountain always means you can see what's coming. Every disaster film that's about the castaway, the first thing they seem to do is find the high point and get some sort of perspective around. So from this high point, hopefully that we can see what's coming, or maybe it'd be interesting to be the mountain and to think about how you might mention the arrival of a threat and what you can do. Can you move mountains? Can the mountain move?
I'm actually doing a project called and we've been thinking a lot about the different times that we experience dependent on, like, yeah, I suppose if you were the mountain, the pace at which you would respond to something would be a lot slower, even if what is being done to you is maybe seen as like extra harmful. The time at which it would take people to realize might, I don't think it will be too late, but it will just, it's not the same time frame that we work on. Or I suppose it's like this whole ontology thing, like if we're all in these different positions, like it's just experience a river in a completely different way than we would, and what would it mean for time or sensation or emotion. And I wonder like what the energy of this island, like I feel like I like look at it and it's like a big draw, and you're like wondering, is it like super powerful, or like how does it feel to be energy, but also how of the island to have this massive kind of source that seems to be like nourishing. And then yeah, time. I wonder what time is like for mycelium as well.
Yeah, I feel like, or I was thinking about it earlier, if mycelium can provide some form of like scaffolding for islands, you know? If you think about Venice, like sinking, for instance, I used it, I think that there was some like attempt to grow mycelium bricks to help elevate the sinking island. So it will like literally, like the people living in Venice will be basically surviving because of the mycelium, holding their island above water.
It's a brilliant idea. Yeah.
It's so crazy. And like, what else do you talk to underground? I think like if you were a tree and then you get to like your other tree friend is very far away from you, but they've been hurt, and then they're telling you like there's danger. But then the mycelium's also like providing the connection of communication, but also like communicating amongst itself as well. What will it be saying underneath them? It'll have a nice relationship with the water, though, I think. Or maybe not. Maybe it's like not happy with the circumstance.
I love that the boat is bigger than the island. It almost is like the boat could take the island into its hold and sail away. A shocking idea.
Is it also this invader, you know, the kind of not colorful power coming to the island? Quite unknown, quite unclear. What do they want? What do they carry in the boat? But they are bigger than the whole island. So what's going to happen?
I always think how different it would be, because the conquistador is out on the front of the boat with his sword, or I'm actually haven't said her sword, their sword, and their shield. I always think that's if that's your initial impression of the human, how that immediately puts the island on defense.
Mm.
And I look at these swirling currents. What could they do as a form of defense? Or maybe they could.
Well, I did rain on the invader to try to like discourage. Maybe kind of mean.
Imagine if the mycelium could grow around the invader and kind of encapsulate them.
Mm.
It's in a way very similar to the octopus. We seem to be intrigued by these distributed forms of nourishment, consciousness, maybe.
Yeah.
I also wonder with the boat how much it is a boat, and maybe as saying like, is the person just like being experienced as larger because they're an invader, but like the scale of them is actually much smaller. It's just like in our minds we think, okay, potentially they might be harmful, and so we should like do things not to welcome them, but to make them feel smaller through this kind of act of unwelcoming or something. But then I was also thinking about with the boat and this carrier bag theory of fiction, like thinking about how the first cultural device in the world was like some sort of like the boat being a container or a recipient. Like, how could we think about that as care, as opposed to thinking of it as potential threat? Like, if the boat has the ability to carry the island away, is that actually a good thing? Like, is it in danger from something else, or yeah, I don't know, other ways to think about like recipients or containers as things that are protected. And if it's also like autumn, then I mean there are a lot of metaphors there and unanswered.
Jennifer, so we are approaching 12. We have still 10 minutes. Just in case we would like to, or you would like to, we can just continue the discussion, or maybe we could, I don't know.
Well, I think a little bit of a wrap up would be great. And it seems like it's kind of it's the drawing can now actually start to feed the story and the questions, which is really lovely. This cartographic conversation has kind of taken a lot of different shapes, which is fantastic. I love the fact I see a frog that's eating the island. I've just noticed that.
Now I have to say something, it's like,
okay, please
finally, like, because I was listening to it and tuning up was a little difficult because there was some conversation running and I came a little like 40 minutes after the beginning, but I just brought the frog because I saw the shape of the frog ahead and I needed to draw it, and it's not eating the island. Actually, this is kind of like, this is more like, from my perspective, more of the mythology. So that's how it all started, actually, that we were brought to life from the frog, actually. So frog kind of, I don't want to say like throw up the island, but that's how it started. But the shape was there. The shape was there. The frog with the eyes, and I just needed to end it. And it reminds me one of the mythologies from Papua. I think it's from Papua New Guinea, when they believe that frogs has this magical power to bring life, actually. So that's just like my small ending to the island. Sorry.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Miguel. It's almost the genesis from the frog.
Like threw up your land. It would be really nice.
Very nice. Yeah, I thought it'd be really nice just to wrap up with any sort of thoughts on this as a process or a methodology, and whether the island, it was kind of the opener to all this, but I'd like to hear kind of what this has all meant in terms of how we think about care and what care means through this process. So if you have any thoughts that you want to share in that sense, whether it's through the metaphor that we've been drawing in this conversation or anything else, I would just love to hear that.
I can say something. It's terribly difficult to think from the non-human perspective. It's and then for me the double jump of now thinking about care in the non-human perspective is so difficult.
And how about from an autumnal perspective?
Yeah.
How would autumn care?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how do you translate such a human idea into
Yeah, I think it's kind of impossible, but it's also like impossible to think on behalf of other people, like often. Um, in whatever role you're in, I think it's not as available to us as we think it is. Just because we have like the same form doesn't mean.
yeah, perhaps it doesn't need to be rational, the way to think, or at least not rational in anthropocentric ways, but yeah, it's so difficult.
And maybe care is just the human quality that we give it, and then we look for all these examples of care in other things, but it's just the frame that we use. Care is everywhere, everything care. I mean, that's just the human construct. Sonia, Marketa, any thoughts about care and from your perspective of this anything but human role of energy or Mother Nature? Even Mother Nature as a role is an interesting one.
Big shoes to fill in. I was just thinking as Kike was talking about care and from non-human perspective, and then that care maybe human. I was thinking from the Mother Nature perspective, from my very humble position of Mother Nature. Um, I could say that within nature we talk about ecosystems, that's symbiotic relationship. That's the care, like relationship that's symbiotic, that all involved both contribute. So in a way, it's not maybe care as a social human construct of being something that's emotional, or kind of emotional, maybe conscious effort into helping. I think in a way, symbiotic relations and symbiosis is very. Yeah, I think that's the factor in the nature with a non-human world, that it's there isn't really an agreement. It just that there isn't really yeah, kind of a verbal agreement of what I get out of what I get out of. It's just probably would be care from a Mother Nature perspective, symbiotic relationship between the entities involved.
How they come in together.
Yeah.
I would say from the perspective of selfish mycelium, that I like that we made the mycelium care visible. Yes, it stays under the ground and it might stay invisible to many, especially like human consumers. So I'm glad that my merits have been seen on this island and somehow acknowledged. But yeah, it opens this whole like question about the invisible care and invisible labor in ecosystems. You can think about like fermented food, like all this work done by the microbes, like in terms of changing some nutrient qualities of some food into something else, which is then pampering our gut. And the same with mycelium, just providing this source of energy and food for the whole forest, basically. And how like usually as a human consumer, you just see the mushroom, like the same as the shape on the mirror, like this. But it's not this, it's this. Like the mycelium is so much bigger.
Yeah, I love the fact. I mean, referring to the scaffolding is just it's the core of so much. Yeah,
it's like the tip of the iceberg, but it's not really the tip. The real thing is under the water. Same with the mushroom. It's not really the mushroom. It's everything that's underground.
Yep, absolutely. I don't know if we ever got a chance to hear from you and but hopefully they enjoyed it. And Zoom, same thing. There's always quiet observers, and I think the observer is as important a role as anything else. So yeah, I'm glad that they were able to join us today. Jennifer, any sort of parting thoughts that you might like to share?
I wish that I could come up with something nice for everyone to tie it up, but I really enjoy these ideas of the invisible labor of the ecosystem. I think we're often not considering. I mean, I have felt this year that I've experienced spring for the first time in my life, actually, which is obviously it's like ridiculous. But witnessing growth and being able to kind of be in these little like bubbles created by like the scents of plants and stuff feels like a way that nature can care for you. I mean, I also have allergies to pollen, the opposite of care, but it's nice to consider, these like very personal spaces of care created by what's around us in the city, and then like the larger ecosystems at play that we totally do not understand, or maybe some people do more than me, but thank you all. It seemed like I really liked the positions that everyone decided to assume as well. That was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So the mural board will be there. Feel free to come back to it. And it's funny. I think that the roles that everyone chose are really conceptual, but they're just fantastic for feeding imagination, and not just your own imagination. I think we kind of fell in and out of each other's roles to some extent, which I think is that relationship or that connection. So thank you everyone for your thoughts. There's lots for Jennifer and I to kind of sit with on this as well, which is great. And it's just such a wonderful process for us to get to do alongside each of you. So thank you very much. And I'm going to head off and go back to bed. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Anna, to Enrique, to Marketa, and to Michal. Thank you ever so much for hosting this fantastic festival. It's a humble, wonderful experience, and we just really appreciate how beautifully it's organized. And thank you to Ewan and Sonia, and thank you for your comment, Yoon. And it's just been really lovely meeting you. So please do feel free to keep in touch. And we look forward to the recording as well, to kind of sitting and going through this process and hearing your words.
Yeah, thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much for everything, and for organizing, and for surviving the night.